job, Scott. Madam Secretary, will you please take the roll?
Alderman Archiola.
Present.
Alderman Beatty.
Alderman Beatty would like to be excused, Madam Secretary.
Thank you. Alderman Bevan. Here. Alderman Casey.
Here.
Alderman Federico.
Here.
Alderman Fowler.
Here.
Alderman Healy.
Here.
Alderman Jenkins. Alderman Marlowe.
Here.
Alderman Morenin.
Here.
Alderman Pacelli.
Here.
Alderman Smith. Alderman Vitro.
Here.
Alderman Vitale. Alderman Willis.
Here.
14 are present.
14 present. We do have a quorum. Thank you, Madam Secretary. The next portion of the meeting is devoted to public comment. Statements are strictly limited to the legislative function of the Board of Aldermen. Please use every effort to limit public speaking to the permissible business of the Board of Aldermen. The time limit granted to each speaker shall be 3 minutes. Residents, taxpayers, and electors may address the board at this time. The board encourages speakers not to express derogatory, insensitive, or offensive statements, or to engage in personal attacks against individuals. In order to allow everyone an opportunity to speak, I'd ask that everyone please limit their comments to 3 minutes. Please keep in mind that the structure of our meeting does not allow for two-way dialogue during public comment or to answer any of your questions. Residents can contact their district alderman by phone or by email regarding any issue of concern for the purpose of obtaining general information or guidance on what city agency may be of assistance. We welcome and appreciate your comments and opinions regarding city business and community matters. All your concerns will be taken into consideration. We thank you for your cooperation. Anyone wishing to address the board can do so at this time. Please state your name and address clearly for the record. Thank you.
Robert Gregory, 14 Manor House Lane, Milford. And I come here tonight to address the board, Chairman Vitro and other women and men of the board regarding the pension for former employees of the city. I'm here to express my support as president of the Milford Municipal Retirees Association. In the past 4 years, we have not been very active due to COVID. And then they tore down the place where we had our meetings, Costa Azura. And so we're currently getting reorganized. We also had unfortunate death in our officers and resignations, so we're reforming the board and getting together again. There has not been an increase in the pension since 2012, and I think it's long overdue. I understand that there is a proposal for a 4% increase from the pension board recommendation. The city people, dedicated group of individuals, have served our community with unwavering commitment and deserves to be recognized for their contributions. Retirees from the city of Milford have dedicated years of service, often sacrificing personal time and resources to ensure the smooth operation and well-being of our city. Their efforts have helped shape Milford in the vibrant and prosperous community it is today. A raise of 4% is not merely a token of appreciation, but a necessary step to ensure that our retirees can maintain a decent standard of living in the face of rising costs of living. It reflects our commitment as a community to honor their service and provide for their well-being during their retirement years. I urge you to consider this proposal with utmost consideration for the retirees who have dedicated their careers to the city of Milford. A 4% raise in their pension will not only acknowledge their hard work and dedication, but also demonstrate our city's commitment to supporting those who have contributed so much. Thank you for your consideration of this proposal, and I trust that you will make the decision that best reflects values of our community and supports our retirees in their well-deserved retirement. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman Vitro. Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Alders. My name is Marguerite Hennessy. I reside at 35 Elaine Road, and I would like to speak about the proposed ordinance to ban all motorized recreational vehicles in the city. I understand the need for an ordinance to prevent street takeovers and to ensure the safety of motorists and police officers. However, I believe that this proposed ordinance is overly broad in its scope. The current language is unclear. It fails to differentiate between classes of e-bikes. I'm sorry, I'm speaking specifically about e-bikes. It doesn't make differentiate between the classes of e-bikes. The maximum speed for class 1 and 2 e-bikes is only 20 miles an hour, and the maximum speed for a class 3 e-bike is 28 miles per hour. An outright ban on all e-bikes would unfairly target individuals who rely on them for daily transportation and errands. It's possible to ban dirt bikes and ATVs without banning e-bikes, as under Connecticut Public Act 18165, an act revising motor vehicle statutes, has a very specific definition of e-bikes and also includes electric bicycle, does not include a dirt bike or all-terrain vehicle. Legally, they are different, so it would not be necessary to include e-bikes under this ordinance. Additionally, such a ban would disregard the various incentives aimed at promoting e-bike adoption, including federal tax incentives and the overwhelmingly popular state voucher program that exhausted its funding in a matter of months last year. As someone who uses an e-bike due to health limitations, I find the proposed ban to be ableist. It would prevent individuals like myself from enjoying the benefits of cycling and participating in outdoor activities. Please consider revising the ordinance to focus on specific issues caused by street takeovers while still allowing responsible e-bike use. Thank you very much for your time.
Pat Del Vecchio, 56 Mark Street. I could read my speech, but she just said it all. So I have already addressed the ordinance committee about my concerns and where an e-bike or an e-scooter fits in that are exactly as she described. So please consider narrowing this down and not having such a broad, vague definition of who is allowed to ride such vehicles and to use them on our city streets. It is left too much to the interpretation of the viewer or enforcement or who sees what on any given day. It needs to be very clear before you're going to do severe penalties. Thank you very much.
Good evening, Mayor D'Anastasio, Aldermen. My name is Kimberly Reel. I live at 13 Chaucer Court in Milford. I am the program coordinator for the Milford Prevention Council, and I'm also a mom of 2. Last month, you guys heard testimony from some individuals that want to allow for cannabis dispensaries to be allowed in Milford. And I'm here tonight to discuss with you why that is not a good idea. With the legislation approving and legalizing adult use cannabis, and with the loopholes in the Farm Bill, access to tetrahydrocannabinol, or THC, which is the psychoactive compound in cannabis, has significantly increased. In addition to the dispensaries in neighboring towns, the convenience stores and gas stations in our city also sell psychoactive products with varying levels of THC and THC derivatives. After more than 50 years of research, the impact of cannabis on brain development is clear. There is no question at all that it contributes to changes in the brain that can lead to lifelong struggles with addiction and substance dependency. Short term, it causes deficits in memory, motivation, and focus that impacts academic success. It also affects decision making, which in youth is already something that is developing, and it can lead to them making poor decisions that can result in injury or even death. Youth cannabis use increases the odds of using other drugs and also significantly impacts the risk of developing mental illness later on in life, specifically with schizophrenia. In a study of over 7 million people that took place over 5 decades, they found that males specifically had a 30% increased risk of developing schizophrenia in their late 20s when they would use cannabis daily in adolescence. Additionally, the risk of suicide increases 7-fold with daily use in adolescence. This is a lesson, unfortunately, that Colorado has learned firsthand. The danger is in the potency, as plants are now cultivated to have 20 to 30% THC, when in the 70s and 80s it was closer to 2 to 5%. Concentrates have even a higher potency of 60 to 99%. The impact on the developing brain at these levels is devastating. The higher the potency, the higher the risk of acute psychosis, mental illness, addiction, suicide, and lifelong dependency. Brain development continues until age 25 for females and 30 for males or those that are neurodiverse. To be clear, there is no safe level of cannabis for youth. Moving on to the impact on the community, increased presence of cannabis retail normalizes its use for both youth and adults. Legalization implies that cannabis is safe when it is not. Just like alcohol, cannabis comes with a plethora of risks, but unlike alcohol, cannabis is not regulated or monitored by any governmental agency. What that means is that there is no consistency with product concentration, and no one is checking. In fact, 85 to 90% of non-medical cannabis that has been tested across the nation tested above 15% THC levels, when anything over 10% is high potency, as decided by the medical community and researchers. While alcohol is still the most used substance of Milford youth, 2% of 7th graders and 15% of high schoolers have used cannabis in the past 30 days. Due to so much misinformation out there, adults and parents do not always fully understand the risk that cannabis brings and may not talk to their children about cannabis use. While studies are mixed on whether legalization increases local crime rates, what is clear is that the risk of violence doubles in those adolescents that use marijuana. Cannabis use can cause acute psychosis, which is a main risk factor for violence. Increases in emergency department visits have been shown to increase both in adolescents and adults who use cannabis. The first year they legalized it in California, ER visits related to cannabis increased 43%. Additionally, recent research shows that cannabis-involved motor vehicle fatalities have more than doubled since 2000. Cannabis-related motor vehicle accidents are more likely to involve those under the age of 35 and contribute to the death of the passengers. Among those who receive treatment for a cannabis use disorder, 50% admit that they drive under the influence. These are just a few of the risks associated with cannabis. Allowing an avenue for more cannabis in Milford is not the direction I think we need to go. Working to limit access to cannabis to our youth and making sure that the community at large and adults know its risk is what we need to do. We need to change the narrative. I hope that the decision makers in Milford will think about this next time it comes up. And then I just brought, because time is limited, a couple handouts. The reason they're thick is because I wanted you to see all my references, and my contact information is in there if anyone wants to discuss further. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Julie Nash, and I am the Director of Economic Development for the City of Milford, and I'm here to speak in favor of items 8A and 8B. These transit-oriented properties are languishing and stretching the potential of tax rolls in the heart of our fast-growing transit-oriented area. Housing is a crisis in this nation and in Milford. The smart, economical, and right thing to do is to get them back on the tax rolls where they can flourish with activity. This will allow for more feet on the ground in our downtown, further supporting small business in the area, not just our retail and restaurants, but also our doctors and lawyers' offices and more. What generally happens with these types of buildings in our downtown is we see the younger generations moving in that are carless. They hop on the trains, they go to their work in Stamford or New York, and then they come back home. They eventually want to start a family, and then they're buying our single-family homes. It's this really nice cycle that we're seeing in a lot of communities, specifically Milford. The other portion of folks that are living in these homes are the snowbirds, who are over 60, who want to live in Milford and have a home here, but they also want to visit family in Florida or wherever they may live. They're giving up these homes, and those younger generation are kind of taking up those homes. So it's like this really nice cycle that we want to continue in the city. As I've studied the economics of all manner of business, I can very easily find a saturation point for a lot of industries, such as self-storage. But after enormous research and conversations, the truth is there's no saturation point for housing. There's just none. There's never going to be enough housing. So getting these properties on the tax rolls is the best way for us to help our community. All sorts of data speak to the problem that we see in housing right now, and it's the way we work, divorce rates, and a lot more. Some of you came to my Economic Development Forum where we kind of talked about why housing is in such a crisis right now, and specifically as in Milford, we really just need more housing. So Mayor Giantasio's effort is smart in moving on these properties efficiently and swiftly to take the pressure off the city resources. We just went through a whole budget process, as you all know, where we're difficult kind of figuring out these loopholes. Where are we going to put money here, money there? And we have these two incredible properties in this incredible downtown that are really going to attract some great folks to our city and continue that population growth that we want to see here in the city of Milford. Again, and by owning these properties, we can be really careful and cautious when we put out an RFP or RFQ, however we decide to move forward with the properties. When we're working with a potential developer, we can ensure that the properties reflect the wants and needs of our community. And that could be anything from the architectural considerations, maybe some public art, energy efficiency, something that's going to complement our downtown. And I think that the mayor and the entire city were all open to various options that could come with these properties. I think it could be a really shining star of our downtown to complement all the other development that's going on, and to welcome that influx of more folks who are downtown, I think would be really helpful where we are in this state of inflation and the population and housing crises across the nation. Just a couple of quick facts for you. Studies show that properties within a half mile of transit stations can increase in value by up to 20% compared to similar properties without transit access. TOD can stimulate local economies by attracting businesses and creating jobs. It's estimated that every $1 invested in public transportation projects generates $4 in economic returns. And this was highlighted by the American Public Transportation Association's Economic Impact Report. Transit-oriented development encourages the use of public transportation, which we all really want to encourage at this point, especially looking at climate change, which can reduce the traffic congestion and decrease the need for expansive road infrastructure. This can lead to saving on transportation costs for households with potential reductions of up to $9,000 per household in transit expenses. By promoting the use of public transit, TOD reduces greenhouse gas emissions. Public transportation produces 76% fewer pollutants for passengers compared to private vehicles. Again, this is another economic impact study from the EPA. I'm happy to forward you more of my footnotes and statistics. I don't want to take up too much of your time, but I think this is a fantastic project. I think it's really going to complement our downtown. And I think with the community's input, your input, and the foresight of the mayor, I think it's going to be a really great project. So I'm certainly in favor. Thank you.
Anyone else wishing to address the board can do so at this time. Seeing none. Oh, sorry.
Sorry that we didn't address before. We're really new at this. So, Mr. Mayor, board, aldermen and alderwomen, thank you for your time. We have been informed a few things, and that is that the property is not going to go past. It does have a different line than we were seeing in the Milford website, and from seeing what we've seen in the Connecticut Post, etc. So we do understand that it's not going past that, which was one of our concerns. We are interested in the RFP process, and also in hopes that perhaps it could be split into 2 single-family homes and purchased by perhaps an adjacent property owner, and go forth and putting 2 properties. I understand the fantasy, in my opinion, of that it would cause great foot traffic in Milford Center, and how wonderful, but you perhaps have never been on High Street trying to get out of your driveway at 8 o'clock in the morning with Harborside and Laurelton Hall both trying to get into school and parents dropping them off. So I really do have a problem with multiple housing there. but I'm hoping that maybe the city would be able to accept the finances of having 2 single homes and taxes based on that. Thank you.
Anyone else wishing to address the board? Seeing none, we'll move on to agenda item number 3, consideration of minutes, the regular meeting of the Board of Aldermen. Alderman Pacelli.
Agenda item number 3, consideration of minutes of the regular meeting of the Board of Aldermen held on May 6, 2024.
Second.
Motion has been made and seconded. Is there any discussion? Alderman Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think that the minutes are from the June 3rd meeting, not the May 6th meeting. Just saying.
Yeah, it sounds like looks like a typo. Thank you, Alderman Smith. Want to read that again, Alderman Pacelli?
I do. Consideration of minutes of the regular meeting of the Board of Aldermen held on June 3rd, 2024.
Second.
Motion has been made and seconded. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor? Opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Agenda item number 4, consideration of minutes of special organization meeting. There was none. Chairman's report and recommendations. I'd just like to wish everyone a happy and safe summer. We've had some really hot days and some really hard rains, but all in all, I think we came out very well in the city of Milford. Mr. Mayor, do we have a report or recommendations?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Through you, good evening. It's great to be back at City Hall. I want to thank the residents for coming out and to speak on the ordinance, the ATV ordinance. I took the liberty of inviting Chief Mello here tonight to answer any questions the board may have. In regards to the ordinance, it's strictly a deterrent. It's something that I think the whole community will be happy with. It's something that if these people are caught, there will be consequences. And right now, I think that's in the best interest of everyone. As far as the 824 requests that are before you, city-owned property, we want to redevelop this property, we want to put it back on the tax rolls, and we want to control the product. We want to control the end result and what's best for the neighborhood, whether it's 2 single-family houses on High Street, and at the other location, closer to the train station, it could be a 3-family, multi-family house, but in the best interest of all the people of the community. So I'm excited about that. And I also want to make an announcement. I believe July 27th, the Milford Rotary is holding its annual lobster bake, which is a great event. I've been there. It's wonderful. The money goes to a great cause. I've been attending a lot of community events this time of the year, and I got to tell you, people are happy. The beaches are busy. The splash pad the other day was full of kids. The pickleball courts were busy. I was invited to the firemen's picnic, family picnic. We have a very young fire department. I don't know if people realize that or not, but they have young families, and they're a great bunch of people, and I'm proud of the work that they do. And maybe, Chief, when you have your police picnic, you can extend an invitation. I'd be happy to go to that as well. So if there's anything further, I'd be happy to answer any questions. That's August. But don't forget about the Milford Oyster Festival. Alderman Vitale reminded me. But I'll be talking about that next month. But get outdoors, enjoy the summer. It's a great city, and I'm here to answer any questions. I ask for your consideration for items 8A through 8C. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
And happy 4th of July to all the residents. There's going to be fireworks at every beach you could imagine, so enjoy the moment. Thank you.
Agenda item number 7, unfinished business, there is none. Agenda item number 8, new business, Alderman Pacelli.
Agenda item 8A, Board of Aldermen approval is requested per the attached recommendation of the Planning and Zoning Commission dated May 23, 2024, pursuant to Connecticut General Statutes, Section 8-24, for the sale of 159-161 High Street, and to authorize the mayor and city attorney to take all steps necessary, including signing all documents to effectuate said sale.
Second.
Motion has been made and seconded. Is there any discussion? Alderman Marlowe.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you, probably to the mayor. I know that the sale of this property, I guess my question is this, I've heard that there can be restrictions put on it. My first question would be is who makes those restrictions on that? You know, we've heard the citizens come and had some concerns about what might go there, and we want to make sure that if this does go through, we address those concerns. And then I guess the other question would be is how does that process work of putting restrictions into an RFP, and is that illegal? Can we legally do that, or will it be challenged? Thank you.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, to Alderman Marlowe. Alderman Marlowe, just some background information. 159-161 High Street was purchased by the city for $250,000 at that time. And the purpose of the purchase was for additional parking at the train station. However, the grade does not meet the parking lot. So this parcel, we'd like to get back on the tax rolls, as you know. The restriction on that parcel being that it is closest to the train station, it's in walking distance, it's not a big parcel. The most you could put there is probably a 3-unit multifamily housing. So probably it would have a affordability component in the RFP, which would be 1 unit, which would be a third, which would be 30%. So that unit is unique. It's a smaller, lot, and that would fit into the TOD district. That's what's allowed there by right. And I would work with the city attorney along with the economic development director, Julie Nash spoke here tonight, and also the city planner to come up with the best product for the citizens of Milford. Thank you.
If I could just follow up, Mr. Chair, through you. With that, Mayor, with that RFP, would that be something we could review before it goes out? And then also with affordability, I think the challenge there is how do we stop an 8-30G from being put on that?
Well, the beauty of the RFP, through you, Mr. Chairman, to Alderman Marlowe, is we control. The city has ultimate control over the redevelopment. So there's no chance that it would become an 830-G, because that's not how we're going to put it out. And we don't need to accept the RFP unless it meets our standards. So we have control from the beginning right to the end. So we wouldn't accept anything that would be a detriment to the city.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Alderman Pacelli.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Through you to Mayor Giantassio, just to expound upon what you had just stated, and maybe Attorney Bertram, you could assist with this. When that request for bid goes out and it's submitted and there's a consideration for that, is the contract to purchase the property that would then come going to have certain restrictions in it, or will there be deed restrictions? Or in other words, how do we avoid the fact that someone met the process but then takes title to the property and may perhaps tries to do something different with it? I just want to understand how it will be protected as a city. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, through you to Alderman Pacelli. The RFP process would dictate the response. So if the response was not responsive, it would be rejected, obviously, but yeah, it would be deed restricted in some form or fashion to ensure that the property is what the prospective preferred developer or purchaser of the lots would have. So we would make sure, I guess, have some insurance by way of deed restriction that the property would perform in the way the RFP was drafted.
Okay, thank you. That's helpful. And then one final thought to this. Is there any role for this board to either approve? I know at this point what we're doing essentially is approving the ability for the mayor's office to go out and seek the proposal. And I have no reason to think that'll be anything but what you're saying, Mayor, so I'm not questioning that. But at the end of the day, depending on what comes back, depending on how people react to that request, there may be a need for something to change. Would there be any opportunity for this board to be involved in a final approval of the, again, the request or the proposals or any change to what may be talked about today? I think I'm just looking for some certainty that would make sure that what we're talking about and approving today is not just carte blanche to then say, well, you know, we tried that, it didn't work, so here's what we're going to do now. Certainly the citizens have spoken, and all of us here, I think, have some concerns that we want to make sure everyone is doing what the city thinks is best, the city planner thinks is best, and also what the local residents think is best as well.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, to Alderman Pacelli. Yes, this is a very transparent process, the RFP process. So we will be accepting RFPs. We will be looking at each individual RFP to make sure that it fits the criteria that we're looking for. And that even goes to the architectural design of the structure. So we're going to be in the weeds with this, and I will have an updated report once we come to a decision as far as what ultimately we have decided that's in the best interest of the community, the neighbors, and the board. Thank you.
Thank you for your response.
Alderman Federico.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Through you to the mayor and to the audience, I want to say, first of all, Ms. Nash and the mayor make very compelling arguments that this property is sitting there. Better to have it on the tax rolls than to be empty and vacant and you know, probably not looking very nice. But the residents and the neighbors of that immediate area have also raised their concerns tonight. Once we approve, if we were to approve this as presented, Mr. Mayor, it's in your hands. And I just want to know, for the folks who raised their voices and asked questions and concerns tonight, what kind of options will they have to weigh in on the project going forward? How will you ensure that you get something that meets the needs of the neighborhood? How will you, how can they voice their concerns directly to you as we go through the process and different proposals are brought forward?
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chairman, to Alderman Federico. So as you saw, I engaged with the neighbors. The specific property that we're talking about right now, the 159-161, is the closest one to the train station. But to your point, every parcel is different. The other piece is closer to the residential side of High Street. So in that regard, we can open this up to the possibility of having two single-family houses rather than a multifamily development. That's the beauty of the RFP. We can tailor it any way we want, and that would be the intent. So we would want to work with the neighbors that are here tonight, the adjacent neighbors, and give them the opportunity to possibly engage in that process. Thank you.
Thank you. May I just ask a follow-up? Would there be any other public meeting, or should they reach out to you directly? Like, how will that be facilitated?
The city attorney will draft the RFP, but it'll be duly noted like any other type of meeting that we have or any type of project that we put out. So there's a process.
Alderman Archeolo.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Through you to the mayor. I just had a quick question. In the event that we approve this as it's written, I was wondering if you have an idea of the timetable moving forward, how long a process or how protracted a process this might be, assuming that there's already a motivated buyer.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, to Alderman Archiola, that's a great question, and I'm happy that there's people here that are actually interested in the parcel. I think that speaks volumes about the community. They believe in Milford, and they want to move Milford forward as well. So this is the first step, and here we are. So once we get your consent to start this process, it's just a matter of maybe 30 days, and then we can start reviewing, RFPs and make a final decision. So, thank you.
If I can just do a quick follow-up. It's just more of a comment. I do genuinely believe that there's probably a way to thread the needle where we fulfill the ever-changing needs of the city, affordable housing, while also maintaining our beautiful footprint in our historic downtown area. Thank you.
Alderman Healy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Through you to the mayor and the city attorney. When we talk about, again, this particular project, and as you've articulated and outlined, three-family, possibly, structure that would be there, and one unit of that would be affordable housing, which refers to housing that's within an individual or a family's budget with a reasonable cost to the occupants. It can also mean housing where landlords, through subsidies or agreements, cannot charge rent above a certain amount tied to the people's income levels. So this is an issue that the city is facing, as we've heard from economic development, as we've seen in recent meetings with planning and zoning and so on. So I think this is a great, project, as outlined, and if we codify this within the RFP to anyone that is developing it on this particular parcel, I would be in agreement with that, but I would certainly want codified on the land records through the city attorney's office prior to the sale the deed restriction that you have outlined, so that there could not be a change relative to this. Thank you. Would that be possible to the city attorney?
Mr. Chair, through you to Alderman Hill, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Any more discussion on the motion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Excuse me, Mr. Chair. I'm sorry, I was going to ask for a recess. Sorry.
We're having a 5-minute recess.
Thank
Yes, you're welcome.
I think the city moving its real property onto the tax rolls is a good one, and it's one that warrants support. It's also my understanding that this will be the first of many of these. The difficulty that gets run into for some of us is that we've watched in what I would deem an overdevelopment problem in many sections of our city, in particular downtown. And the concept here of affordable housing is a slippery slope and one that defies definition. The city of Milford has struggled with the concept of affordable housing for at least 30 years. And those struggles have been both controversial and difficult. The embodiment of the affordable housing controversy that has enveloped Milford on several different occasions has been through the Affordable Housing Statute of the state of Connecticut 8-30G. And while I know that the RFP parameters and deed restrictions here would try to specifically not allow anything like an 8-30G to rule this development, I'm not sure that that can be deed restricted. Maybe it could, maybe it couldn't. But we don't have those deed restrictions here in front of us today. We haven't seen the language. We don't know what the RFP restrictions are going to say. In fact, it is in all likelihood that this is the only opportunity that the Board of Aldermen is going to have any input or leverage on this decision. The overdevelopment in this city, particularly the affordable housing development, has, in my opinion, been ugly, controversial, intrusive. It has pockmarked our city with what I deem to be ugly and non-conforming to the character of the neighborhoods in which it is situated. In fact, I sometimes scratch my head and I look at these affordable housing developments throughout Milford and I wonder if they all don't use the same architect. These things always look exactly the same, ugly and out of character with the neighborhood. I know that the best of intentions are being launched here, but this is something that we are now at the front end of a new policy, what I think is a good policy. But I don't want that to get off on the wrong foot. And the whole concept here of affordable, I think, especially in our historic downtown Milford, I don't think this is the right place to start with this experiment. For these reasons, I am going to be voting no on this, and I would ask that the vote be taken by roll call, Mr. Chairman.
Any more discussion on the motion? Alderman Vitale.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you. There are pros and cons to everything here, and there's a trust factor. We talk about, I don't consider that the downtown area. I really don't. It's not a historical district. It's off the beaten path, that kind of thing. I think we have a lot of construction going on in Milford. I think that we hear from the mayor that, there is going to be integrity in the project. It's going to be what should be there, what it looks like, and how it's going to fit into in satisfying, hopefully, the residents. We're hearing this today. We've got to trust in what we hear today, and I think the indicators of having residents have some input, and maybe prior to, during the process, giving some ideas and views. I mean, we've had other projects where we had public meetings, we had coming in and talking about it and doing short discussion groups and knowing what we're doing with all of this. I think we need to we're not in the real estate business. I don't think the city should be in the real estate business. Those lands that we have could be put to good use, and the good use is put them back on the tax rolls. That's the only way we're going to get taxed, and we're going to get revenue from what we do within the city itself. So I kind of say this, I say that I do trust in what we heard from the city attorney. I do trust what we heard from the mayor, that there would be integrity, that the houses would fit in, and that it would benefit the community. So I will be voting for it. Thank you.
Any more discussion on the motion? Alderman Healy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Through you to the city attorney. Alderman Smith did raise some pertinent issues relative to the overarching, issue relative to 830G and affordable housing. And, but, I look at this on an individual basis. We're looking at this specific piece of property, and you're looking at this, and based on what we have discussed here this evening, you're confident relative to the ability to be able to do the deed restriction, and that this would be able to move forward on an individual basis.
Mr. Chair, through you to Alderman Healy, affordable housing developments are essentially defined as housing developments that are either assisted housing developments, which not less than 25% of the dwelling units will be conveyed by deeds containing covenants and restrictions. Those restrictions require the dwelling units be sold or rented at prices that will preserve units as affordable for persons whose income is less than or equal to 80% of the median income. You can put a deed restriction as an affordable development. That deed restriction will be good for 30 years. So with the caveat that it's a 30-year deed restriction, I am confident. That's based upon Connecticut Supreme Court case law.
Thank you.
Any more discussion on the motion? Hearing none, all in favor? Opposed? Roll call vote, Madam Secretary, please.
Alderman Archiola?
Yep.
Alderman Bevan? Yes. Alderman Casey?
Yes.
Alderman Federico?
Yes.
Alderman Fowler?
Yes.
Alderman Healy?
Yes.
Alderman Jenkins? Yes. Alderman Marlowe?
Yes.
Alderman Morenon?
Yes.
Alderman Picelli?
Yes.
Alderman Smith? Alderman Vitro?
Yes.
Alderman Vitale? Yes. Alderman Willis?
Yes.
13 yes, 1 no.
13 yes, 1 no. The motion passes. Thank you, Madam Secretary. Agenda item 8B, Alderman Pacelli.
Agenda item 8B, Board of Aldermen approval is requested per the attached recommendation of the Planning and Zoning Commission dated May 23, 2024, pursuant to Connecticut General Statute Section 8-24 for the sale of 203 High Street, and to authorize the mayor and city attorney to take all steps necessary, including signing all documents to effectuate said sale.
Second.
Motion has been made and seconded. Is there any discussion? Alderman Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. For the same reasons that I articulated on the prior proposal, I'm going to be voting no on this one, so I would ask that the vote be by roll call.
Alderman Harlow.
Comment through you, Mr. Chairman. I think that the reasons that are even going to be more on this one, that we are making sure that we're writing the RFP because it's more, I'll call, in a residential area. I heard mention of possibly two-family houses. So I would just like to emphasize that if we need to look at this one as much, if not more, than the other one as far as what deed restrictions would be put in place and what is actually put in the RFP. Thank you.
Any more discussion on the motion? Alderman Healy.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, to the mayor. In terms of this proposal, and you have spoken to a number of the residents that were here, neighbors, on this street, as this development goes forward on this particular lot, and you're talking about the possibility of separating this into two single-family homes, would you envision that the current structure that there would be demolished, and then there would be a separation to two single-family lots, and for a developer to come in?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, to Alderman Healy. Yeah, I would envision that most likely. The building in its state is in disrepair. Our Public Works Director is very familiar with the building, Chris Saley, and he did a walkthrough, and in his opinion, there would have to be a lot of money put into it that the city's not willing to do, but that would be in order to fit 2 single-family homes there. I think you would almost have to, or they can, repair it or remodel it. I think that would probably be their option to whoever, takes on this project.
Mr. Chairman, to the mayor, so looking at it, I would think the same thing, that it would be demolished, that the city, through the developer, then reconfiguring the property into 2 single-family residential lots that are in harmony with the greater area in the neighborhood. It's a handsome piece of property, and the residents that are there and what they've had to say this evening, I think we take that into consideration. So are you committing to doing just that, writing this RFP as a subdivided potential property for 2 single-family residents? That's what we're going for?
Yeah, we would structure the RFP accordingly.
Thank you.
Any more discussion on the motion? Alderman Federico.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, through you to the mayor. And when one of the residents was speaking earlier this evening, I think I heard something along the lines of something could end up being put here that's not in compliance with current zoning requirements. As part of your process, I don't think so, but I just want to be sure. There's no way you could offer a change in zoning as part of your RFP, correct?
Well, technically speaking, the city owns the property, and we have the ability to change a zone, but we would keep the zone because what we're asking for is allowable in the zone, whether it's 2 single-family houses on 203 High Street, and then the other property that we just voted on calls for, multifamily. So it's still within the zone by right.
Okay, thank you. So you would have the ability to change the zone, but you would not?
No, we would keep it within the zone.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Any more discussion on the motion? Hearing none, all in favor? Opposed? Roll call vote. Madam Secretary, please.
Alderman Archiola?
Yes.
Alderman Bevan? Yes. Alderman Casey?
Yes.
Alderman Federico?
Yes.
Alderman Fowler?
Yes.
Alderman Healy?
Yes.
Alderman Jenkins? Alderman Marlowe?
Yes.
Alderman Mulrennan?
Yes.
Alderman Pacelli?
Yes.
Alderman Smith?
No.
Alderman Vitro?
Yes.
Alderman Vitale? Yes. Alderman Willis?
Yes.
13 yes, 1 no.
13 yes, 1 no. Motion passes. Thank you, Madam Secretary. Next on the agenda item number 8C, Alderman Pacelli.
Agenda item 8C. Board of Aldermen approval is requested for the attached resolution regarding master municipal agreement for construction projects between the State of Connecticut Department of Transportation and the City of Milford, and to authorize the mayor to take all steps necessary, including signing all documents to effectuate this agreement.
Motion has been made and seconded. Is there any discussion? I'm sorry. Don't wait so long. Alderman Casey.
So, I see Mr. Shelley and back, so can you please come forward and just provide some context in what we're doing? I think it's agreement between Connecticut DOT and the city, so just provide some context of what we're doing.
Sure. The legal part I'll let Attorney Burcham talk about, but this is just a 10-year agreement. The 10-year agreement that's expiring as of August of this year is just being renewed, and it allows us to partner with the state with some of the grant monies that come through LoSIP, LOTSIP, Town Aid, Municipal Grant Aid. It's a paperwork shuffle that makes it simpler for us to do our work.
How long has it been the case? Like the past 10 years or 20 years, or you maybe don't know?
So I believe the last one was signed in 2013. It was extended 1 year to August of 2024.
Okay.
So it's going to expire 2024, but I'll let Attorney Burcham answer that question.
Mr. Chair, if I may add some context, Alderman Casey's questions. In 2008, 2009, the state of Connecticut created a pilot program because what they were finding was with their partnerships with municipalities for LOTSIP is local transportation capital improvement, in their contracts and their grants, is that they would do a project, but it would take so long to get the contract that was really slowing things down. So they created a master municipal agreement. So that was a handful of towns participated in that. It became effective for all municipalities sometime 2012, 2013. That's when the city of Milford first approved the master municipal grant. It was a 10-year term. It was extended last July for 1 year. It's before you tonight, obviously proposed 10-year agreement. What happens is now that if this is blessed, if a state grant comes up that Public Works wants to avail itself of, rather than negotiate the terms and conditions of the grant, you've already got your 57-page contract. What happens is a project authorization letter is sent, and that's a 3 to 5 page project-specific award, and it's a faster, more streamlined process. The downside, of course, is this is a state contract which has been drafted by the state, approved by the Attorney General's office, with little to no room for negotiation for municipalities that have it.
Thank you.
Any more discussion on the motion? Alderman Smith.
Thank you. To Director Salier, perhaps City Attorney Burcham, that 3 to 5 page letter, does that allow the city to set out the parameters that might vary somewhat from this master agreement?
Mr. Chair, through you to Alderman Smith, not in the way that you say vary. It's project specific in terms of dollars spent, project involved, but there's not much deviation from the agreement that's before you. The bones of the agreement are here. The arteries are the project authorization letter.
And it's my understanding that you actually reached out to the state and asked them about a number of potential variations to this agreement. Is that correct?
Mr. Chair, through you to Alderman Smith, that is correct. As you'll see, there's quite a few references to the state's sole discretion in making decisions. I had requested that sole discretion be changed to discretion not to be unreasonably withheld by the state, and received a response. My office received a response that the document had been drafted. They weren't interested in changing it this time.
Thank you. As with that other agreement that we had before us a while back, these one-size-fits-all, where the other party can do anything they want in their own sole discretion, regardless of what the city of Milford likes, strikes me as bad contracts. And I realize it take it or leave it, and there's money involved, and if you want the money, you've got to go with their contract regardless. We have had contracts in front of us that I thought were very different, that were good for Milford, that allowed for discretion and give and take and building a consensus between parties. So this is not that kind of contract. And so I have voted no on that earlier contract because it was similar to this in many ways. I appreciated the city attorney's office trying to reach out to to the state and just asking them to act reasonably. The very fact that the state has declined to even purport that they are going to act reasonably should be a red flag for everyone. When these kinds of contracts come before us and they have those kinds of provisions in them, as I did before, as I'm going to do tonight, I'm going to vote no. I'm going to try and ring the bell. I'm going to try to let everybody in the town and the Public Works or whoever is the applicable agency know that at least for some people, those kinds of contracts are bad business for the city of Milford. This isn't quite as bad as that federal contract we had before us there a month or two ago, where they said that we're not even going to tell you what this is about, and we're simply going to change it up any way we want, and you're going to live with it. But this is the next worst thing. And this is nothing like that other contract for the disaster aid that we had before us, which was a very good contract. So for the requests made by the city attorney and for other things in this document, I'm going to be voting no. And Mr. Chairman, just for convenience and saving time, I would ask that the vote be by roll call.
Alderman Pacelli.
Thank you, Chairman Vitro, through you to Attorney Bertram. Attorney Bertram, based upon the document, which it's obvious that you and your staff have read and put before us today to get on this agenda, is it your recommendation that this board should approve this contract as drafted in order to put the city in the best position possible related to the various grants?
Mr. Chair, through you to Alderman Pacelli, yes, these are the rules of the game of the state grants. I think Director Saley can fill you in terms of the amount of the grants that we receive from the state to participate, and this is one of the conditions that we have to satisfy. So yes, it is my office's recommendation that this be approved because frankly our ability to access lot SIP and load SIP grants would be gone if we didn't.
Thank you very much.
Alderman Healy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Through you to Director Saley, you've been employed as a Director of Public Works for over 10 years, is that correct?
That's correct.
And during your experience in dealing with the state on these particular matters, has there already been any issues at all?
We've never had an issue with the state.
Through the city attorney, have we had any legal action that we've had to enter into relative to any of these matters relative to the state of Connecticut in this history?
Mr. Chair, through you to Alderman Haley, no, we have not.
Okay, this goes, thank you for knocking on wood. This goes back also to what we talked about on the federal emergency management grant, in that there was no negative history, that the city does have the option, if there is an adverse legal situation, through competent legal counsel, the city attorney's office, to engage in a civil litigation that would deal with any particular issue at that time. But having none in terms of the negative history, I think we should move the question. Thank you.
Any more discussion on the motion? Alderman Vitale.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, through you to Mr. Saley. Good evening, Mr. Saley.
Good evening.
The key words there are construction projects. Are any on the drawing board, or are these future projects?
It's money that the state, we receive from the state. An example that we've done recently in the last number of years, Fanny Beach, we put a new roof on that building. The Margaret Egan Center, we use money for that as part of these projects. It's money that the state gives us. So there's nothing specific right at this time. There's I think it's a little over $500,000. We're going to be doing some paving, and those roads will be off of Naugatuck Ave from Subway all the way down to West Ave.
So there's no list of projects that are in the pipeline?
The projects that we have for the $500,000 that's coming is going to be paving the streets, Naugatuck Ave, from Subway.
Started that already? Is that
West
part of Broad Street?
No. This is we do it. The city does it. This isn't a state project. It's our project. They give us the money to do the work.
And you said something about Fanny Beach?
Previously, we've used some of this money to put a new roof on Fanny Beach, to put a new roof on Margaret Egan Center. There's a number of projects that we've done with it.
As projects go on and
yes,
money comes in. Okay, thank you.
Any more discussion on the motion? Hearing none, all in favor? Opposed?
Thank you.
Roll call vote, Madam Secretary, please.
Alderman Archeola?
Yes.
Alderman Bevan? Yes. Alderman Casey?
Yes.
Alderman Federico?
Yes.
Alderman Fowler?
No.
Alderman Healy?
Yes.
Alderman Jenkins? Yes. Alderman Marlowe?
Yes.
Alderman Mulrennan?
Yes.
Alderman Pacelli?
Yes.
Alderman Smith?
No.
Alderman Vitro?
Yes.
Alderman Vitale? Yes. Alderman Willis?
Yes.
12 yes, 2 no.
12 yes, 2 no. The motion passes. Thank you, Madam Secretary. Next item on the agenda is agenda item number 9, new business not on the agenda. There is none. Move on to agenda item number 10, budget memo transfers. There is none. Moving on to refunds. And there is none. Reports of standing committees. Alderman Pacelli.
Thank you, Chairman Vitro. The Ordinance Committee had moved forward with an ordinance to be considered by the full board, and that is Agenda Item 12A1, an ordinance adopting Chapter 14, Motor Vehicles and Traffic, Article 5, all-terrain vehicles, dirt bikes, mini cycles, motor-driven cycles, pocket bikes, etc.
Can I entertain a second? Motion has been made and seconded. Is there any discussion? Alderman Marlowe.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to Chief Mello. Could you just give us an explanation of this, some thoughts that went behind it?
Certainly. Good evening, everyone. So, as you may or may not know, this was the mayor's initiative, and he had asked me to look over the ordinance and support it, and I met with my staff, and we do support it. And we support it under the premise that we think it's an additional tool that will help us address street takeovers. And so, I've been asked a number of questions regarding what are street takeovers and how do they impact Milford. And I think we all kind of know what they are, and we know when we see them. I know last Thursday I happened to turn on Channel 8, and they were talking about how Waterbury's doing the same ordinance, and perhaps it's passed. And they were talking about street takeovers in Waterbury, but they were showing Milford, and they were showing the 200 vehicles. Most of those vehicles are addressed here, and some are not. Some are registered. And they were coming off 39, and they took over 5 lanes of the Boston Post Road. And then interesting, today, when I left here and I went home, I was clicking through the international news, and I clicked through all the news quite a bit, and they were talking about street takeovers across the country, and they were talking about Chicago, and then they referenced it in Derby, Connecticut, and they showed the visuals from Derby, and it reminded me that while that occurred in Derby, that it went through Shelton, and it came to Milford, and it wound up at the Stop and Shop. And they lit a fire, and one officer, the first officer that was there, responded and went in the middle because of the fire, and he was attacked and assaulted. He was kicked and he was punched, and you all saw, I'm sure, the body cam video. So we know what it is when we see it. We know what it is when a family's driving down the Boston Post Road, and they get in the middle of this, and the husband yells out, the driver yells out at one of the motorists in his car, he gets attacked and his car gets damaged. So we know what it is when we see it. I took the liberty of looking at Public Act 23-203 that the state addressed last year, and they came up with a definition. I'm aware that this is in approximately 9 different communities in our area: New Haven, Bridgeport, Ansonia, Shelton, East Haven, North Branford. I will tell you that most of what's in here we can address through state statute. We have statutes. I can tell you that what's in here, while complex and confusing, especially to those that haven't read statutes or proposed or crafted statutes, there's a lot of specificity in here. It kind of mirrors what is in Title 14 of the state statutes. That's very confusing. And there's reasons for that specificity. But I want to take it one step further. When I saw this and I looked at it, and as I explained to the mayor, this isn't a panacea. Nothing is. It will allow us to, there will be greater accountability, and hopefully with that greater accountability, with the increased fines and the fact that we can hold these vehicles until that person pays the fine, or that vehicle may be forfeited via administrative hearing, which is documented in here. I think it has more of a deterrent value than anything else. Hopefully people will think twice about coming to Milford. Right now, they're not. We have 7 exits on and off of the 95 corridor. We have Route 1. We have a lot of shopping. We have a lot of parking lots. We're dealing with this every Saturday, or we were until we finally convinced the landlords to not allow these car meetups, that they're fine when they're there, but when they leave, it takes a lot of our resources, and we issue a lot of fines and infractions to those vehicles that we can stop. We've been successful in enforcing these mostly after the fact, and mostly through video technology or other intelligence, where we go back and we assign investigators to locate these people, these offenders, and then we arrest them, usually via warrant after the fact. We've been successful with our strategies in trying to funnel these offenders into a certain area, but all they do is run from us. And so we know that. So any additional tool that we can have, I think has value. And I think that that's what this does here. What I had told the city attorney is I wanted to make it clear, and I appreciate all the folks that came, that are listening, and those that spoke. And so hopefully I can answer some of their questions and alleviate some of their concerns. This is only going to be used by the police department for street takeover behavior. And while it doesn't say that in here, I'd ask the city attorney to put a preamble in there so the reader, so all of you know, and the reader knows, and when there's hopefully followed by a public information campaign so that people know that this is what it's for. And you may ask yourself, well, why doesn't it just say it in there? Because those that are involved in legal work, crafting legislation, enforcing statutes, know that much of these things are open to interpretation, and we don't want to leave one police officer or one person to be able to interpret it his or her way. And so instead of getting into the arguments when we arrest somebody, was that a street takeover by the definition? The definition is in the preamble, and the policy will dictate our discretion to use those only during street takeovers. Another thing that I was concerned about was to make sure that there were exceptions, and there are exceptions in here. And I understand it's difficult to read. I haven't been in the field in very long, and I found it very difficult to read. And I've spent a lot of time saying, well, what exactly is this? So I feel your pain. E-bikes are not in here. And I know it appears that an e-bike might be a mini-cycle, but it's not, because the definition of mini-cycle talks about combustion motors, piston motors with less than 50 cc's, and an e-bike is less than 750 watts, and an e-bike has pedals, and an e-bike has a step-through frame, and an e-bike, when it's not pedaled, can't go more than 20 miles an hour. And so it's not in here. But if you're the average reader, you're not going to understand that. And welcome to the world of Title 14. It's interesting, and I know many of you know this, certainly those that are in the business, have been in the business know this. Whenever you look at a state statute, it starts normally with definitions. And so that's what's done here. And so they're mentioned, for explanation purposes as definitions, but motorized recreational vehicles don't include mopeds. They don't, and mopeds and scooters are the same thing under federal definition of less than 50 cc's. Normally, there's a platform that you put your feet on. And so those are carved out of here. But what's in here are are vehicles and motorcycles and mini bikes and mini cycles and all the other things that are coming into play that aren't street legal, that shouldn't be on the street anyways. We're not creating new law, well, not law, but we're not creating new restrictions in the sense that these things aren't supposed to be in the road anyways. And for instance, golf carts, somebody said, well, that's great, golf carts are exempt. Well, golf carts are illegal in Milford. Nobody's supposed to be driving golf carts. Only the local traffic authority can approve that. And there's 5 things that you have to have. You have to be over 16. It's got to be during the day, during the hours of daylight. It has to be on a local road under 25 miles an hour. You have to have a light, a horn, and a flag. And it has to be inspected. So, you know, as I told people, let's not even open that door because they're not legal. But for the nice woman that was up here that talked about the motorized assistance she needs, that's exempt. All those things are exempt. So there's 2 really important things people, to try to simplify this, should remember. It's only going to be used per policy, which means that's how we direct our officers, per policy in the event of a street takeover behaviors. And even if that isn't enough, e-bikes are not included. Mopeds and scooters under 50 cc's are not included. And again, the definitions are confusing, so I understand that. I'd be happy to help you to explain some of those, but you know, again, I hope we can kind of keep this simple. And I was asked another question, why not carve out this or carve out that? Now you're making it more complex for the officer. Because when there's a street takeover, the officers are going to need to know what vehicles apply. And this is pretty all-encompassing of the vehicles that we know and that all the communities in Connecticut know are the ones that are involved in street takeovers. And when these folks get together and they're involved in these street takeovers, it's not just, it's their behavior. It's their disruptive, their disorderly behavior, the fact that they've assaulted motorists, they've assaulted police officers. And I will tell you this, we have to do something more. Again, not a panacea. People are angry and they're upset with us. And I'm sure you've heard it, we hear it, and I don't like to read comments on social media, but sometimes I do, and I say, the police are doing nothing. You know, we have restrictions, understandably so, when we can pursue. And so we know these people are going to run from us. So this is going to help us catch people, but hopefully help us hold people more accountable. And even if you didn't do this, there's still state statute that addresses most of these behaviors.
Thank you, Chief, for that explanation. Alderman Marlowe.
Just to follow up, thank you, Chief. Do you see, you know, this is a tool, as you had said. Do you see that there's another piece to this or something else that will follow this? This is like this preliminary, hey, this is where we're starting. What do you see as the next step? Because like you're saying, what I see is the biggest issue is being able to enforce some of this stuff. How do you really do that with the restrictions that are put on the police as far as you can't chase, you can't do this? Right. It's hard, and the police do a great job.
Sure, and as far as those restrictions, I agree with those restrictions. And there's some, you know, we won't get into that, but there's some really valid points. And so we have to find other ways to try to, you know, stop these behaviors. And so I'm glad you asked the question. So I'm going to address it 2 ways. The first way is to talk about the tools that we have, and we've learned to try to funnel, when we get people into a combined area, especially in a parking lot, we will close that parking lot, we will create a choke point and funnel people out. And it's all-terrain vehicles are tough because they're just going to run over the curbs. We use you know, some other technologies that we use that have been helping us. But the other point is this is part of a plan. And so I had worked with the mayor to develop this, what was a 3-point plan and now is a 4-point plan, with this being the first phase. And the other areas that we have been working on for quite some time. In fact, I emailed a draft copy to both the city attorney and to the mayor today. And we're near completion. It will be completed. I think we'll have our work done sometime in the fall. You folks will be involved in this plan because it requires some legislative approval, some ordinance approval. But part of the plan, in addition to things I've talked about that would complement this, and I talked to you about our use of drones. Somebody asked me at the public hearing about what's the future of law enforcement. I said it's absolutely the use of drones. Drones as first responders. I'm not playing with a drone off the shelf. I'm talking about drones as first responders, almost like a mini air unit for the smallest or the largest community. We've done a lot of work on this, a lot of research. And I was asked about drones at the break. And so what we do when we have intelligence that comes in, because we have a very robust intelligence effort, They'll work with, there's the CTEC unit, which is the state, Connecticut State Police, do a lot with intelligence. We all share intelligence. We know what people are saying. We know who actually organizes these things. We've arrested a lot of them. And so what we try to do is anticipate when they're coming. And they try to, they go from town to town and they move around a little bit. And one of the things that we'll do, in fact, there's state task force money that we put together, task forces where we combine our efforts when we know they're coming. So when they know they're coming, we'll have our drone unit ready. The difficulty with the current drone program is you have to unpack it, put it up, and you have line of sight licenses, right? We have 12, 15 pilots, but it has to be within line of sight. And that's limited because what line of sight does is we put it up over the street takeover, and they get quite large. And it allows us to see things on the peripheral that we can't see. We can only see what's in front of us. And there's often other events occurring. But we can't track people because we have to keep it within line of sight. So part of the program that we've developed, and we've worked on this for quite a while, met with all the right folks, gathered all the right information. Our drones as first responders using BVLOS, which is Beyond Visual Line of Sight, requires a special exemption, a special license from the FAA. We've already applied for that. We have some more work to do. We're working with some vendors on that as well, where we can use drones to autonomously be dispatched, not just to a street takeover, but to any critical incident. And that can go beyond visual line of sight. These are law enforcement, specific law enforcement drones. I'm not going to go into too much detail because that's not why we're here, but to answer your question, there's that. We also think that license plate readers, we need to develop a system of license plate readers. I will tell you, I'd like to say that we're first on most. We're not. We're last on license plate readers. Every community around us has them. We deliberately waited before we got involved, but now is the time, and I've discussed that with the mayor. I was hoping to get that done sooner than later, where we will record license plates of vehicles stolen, and that we'll check that with the NCIC database to determine if that vehicle is stolen or if that person's wanted or the vehicle's wanted in connection with a crime. Because we know that people that commit crimes, purse snatches, robberies, carjackings, they're traveling to that location of a stolen car. We know that, and you know how often that's going on. But we think those will help us as well, because some of the vehicles involved in street takeovers are registered vehicles, and that'll help identify those. And finally, the last point of the plan, again, not to go into too much detail, we want to develop a system of speed cameras and red light cameras. And this is a long conversation. There's a state statute that allows us to do that, but there's a process. There's a process for an ordinance. There's a process for involvement of the public. But it's part of the traffic safety plan that you all asked us to work on and that we have completed. And I submitted that today. And the data will then dictate where those cameras go. And we think that'll help, not just with street takeovers, but some of the folks that asked me, well, this might not be a street takeover, but what about this? And what about these things occurring at these times? So we think when we look at the most pressing problems, and it'll be detailed in my plan, there's a few other things, that these things, these 4 phases will complement each other. And I'd like to see some of those things happen sooner than later. I know I went off on a little bit of a tangent, but you asked the question and I was glad to answer. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. And also thank you for answering some of the concerns of the residents.
Thank you.
Alderman Federico.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to call for a recess.
5-minute recess. Let's try to keep it to 5 minutes, folks.
know the definitions that we may or may not want to put into this, as well as that there are other towns who have already instituted this ordinance. And if it becomes a deterrent for the town of Milford, I'm all for it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Alderman Federico.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Through you to the chief and the city attorney. First of all, Chief Mello, thanks for coming before us. Thanks for explaining. I'm very glad to hear that this was not intended to ban e-bikes, because I got some calls and emails from constituents on that topic. I want to ask one quick question. You mentioned that you asked for a preamble, and I just want to be clear, is this section here with the whereas, is this your preamble?
Yes.
Okay.
Preamble be the correct, I'm sorry. I said preamble. Is there a better explanation of what that is?
No.
Preamble, okay.
We just wanted to make sure. Okay. So does that actually go in the ordinance itself?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Thank you. And then just a follow-up question on
Hold
that.
on.
Yep.
I'm sorry.
Sorry, go ahead.
It goes in the minutes part of the record. It doesn't go in the ordinance. My apologies.
Okay. Thank you for clarifying. And then my second question is, can we just follow up and clean up the language around electric bicycles, just to be very clear that they are not included? Attorney Bertram, do you have any concerns with that?
No.
Okay. Okay. Then I would like to propose an amendment. I would make a motion for an amendment to change in the middle of page 2, where it states motor-driven cycle means any motorcycle, motor scooter, or bicycle with an attached motor, and then add the words, except for electric bicycles as defined by Connecticut General Statutes 14-158. And it's the same statute that's referred to in item 2 underneath that.
I'll second that.
And then, okay, and then there's a second part to the change at the very top of page 3, where it says any bicycle, trail bike, and add or electric bicycle, and strike the phrase without a motor. Just to make it clearer for residents reading this, who are not attorneys, who are not police chiefs, to understand what's in the statute, or what's in the ordinance, sorry.
That's good.
Alderman Federico, could you just read the amendment one more time?
Sure. And I have it written down as well, if that helps.
Try to make it condense it as much as possible.
Okay. The middle of page 2, after the phrase with an attached motor, add these words, except electric bicycles as defined by Connecticut General Statute 14-158.
Do we have a second on that amendment motion?
Second.
We have an amendment and a second. Is there any discussion? Alderman Pacelli.
Thank you. Attorney Bertram, it seems that there's some concern related to whether or not what is intended is actually what was in the proposed ordinance related to e-bikes, which I believe is why Alderman Federico just made that proposal. Again, I always like to go back and defer to the city attorney when it comes to changing an ordinance or involving ourselves in an item that might have an unintended consequence. Is it your belief that the amendment proposed would solve a problem if in fact there is a problem? I guess I'm just trying to get to understand whether or not we need to do this or not.
Mr. Chair, through you to Alderman Pacelli, I think for ease of understanding it, I could understand the proposed amendment. In terms of unintended, I think the ordinance as proposed talks about motor-driven cycle having piston displacement. An e-bike does not have piston displacement. That's not something a layperson understands. So I think with the exception proposed. The only thing, I may have given Alderman Federico one bad bit of advice. 14-1 of the Connecticut General Statutes has looked up, it defines all the vehicles, and there's 109 subparagraphs. So 14-1 subparagraph 5.8 is the state's definition of motor-driven cycle. E-bikes are defined somewhere in the subparagraph 31 and 32. For ease of statutory reference, my recommendation would be as defined by Connecticut General Statute. Electric bikes as defined by Connecticut General Statute 14-1, and just leave it at that. And they can read the definitions. But that was a long answer. I can give you a short answer. I think it's a good amendment.
If I make it subject to the change that you just referenced.
For accuracy, yes.
For accuracy, okay.
Any more discussion on the amendment? Alderman Jenkins.
Yes, I do have a concern with the amendment. My concern is whether we have an e-bike, a mini bike, a motorcycle, an ATV. We are talking about during a street takeover. We are not talking about an e-bike being ridden on the side of the road going from point A to point B. We are talking about during a street takeover. And during a street takeover, when there are 30, 40 vehicles, should there be an e-bike, should there be a bicycle that joins in this activity of weaving in and out of cars, going back and forth, running red lights, I would suggest they be held to the accountability of the law as they are involved in this street takeover. Again, we're not talking about everyday point A to point B. It's during the street takeover. So while I understand the point of saying we're not talking about golf carts, we're not talking about e-bikes, we're also not talking about those vehicles on an everyday basis. This is purely during what is considered a street takeover. So I have some hesitation toward that amendment that I would like clarified and worked around.
Alderman Healy.
Through you, Mr. Chair, to Alderman Jenkins. I think that the chief would also say that there are other, statutory opportunities that would be utilized against someone, in particular, irregardless of what they were riding. There's a host of Title 53A of the Penal Code that could apply relative to what individuals' actions would be, and the police department would be applying not only Title 14 of the motor vehicle law, but they'd be applying criminal statutes under the penal code based on the investigative efforts that are conducted by our police department, putting all that together, defining the statutory elements for each individual, statute. And that's what they did relative to the last street takeover. So this particular discussion is almost a nuance, but I think it's well pointed out by Alderman Federico so that we just have some clarification, ease of understanding, and then we're relying on the interpretation of the statutory provisions that are there, both Title 53A and Title 14, and a prosecutorial official is going to be reviewing this for anything that goes forward in terms of charges, unless it happens in the presence of a police officer. Your chief, could you comment on that?
No, that's correct. In fact, the Public Act 23203 goes even deeper, and it talks about criminal charges for people that are just involved in using social media and encouraging it and planning it. And as I mentioned earlier, to Alderman Healy's point, there are statutes that all these are violations already under state statute. What this does is increases the penalty and it allows for the seizure. So if you did nothing today, we still have the Title 14 and 53A statutes that we can rely on.
Alderman Jenkins.
So if I can just follow up on that, that being the case, why need to single out e-bikes in that. I'm
Sure.
I understand, but I think it's a needless amendment that actually gives somebody the grounds to say, but e-bikes are excluded. So just,
So if this is helpful, regardless of what you do in this amendment, if an e-bike is used in a street takeover, we're going to apply those statutes. We won't apply the ordinance, we won't seize the e-bike, but it doesn't mean that anything that's an exemption here is exempt from state law, because it's not. In fact, they're going to be charged with the state violation and the ordinance violation where it applies.
Alderman Archeolo.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, through you to the chief. Thank you very much for your very thorough and detailed take on this ordinance. I do want to get your opinion on the section 14-60, the sale of gasoline for illegal purposes. Oh, we do, I apologize. Yeah. In that case, can I ask for a point of clarification for Alderman Federico to reread it with the, using the appropriate section?
Absolutely. I propose, or I move that we amend on page 2, middle paragraph, that starts with motor-driven cycle. After the phrase bicycle with an attached motor, add the words, except electric bicycles as defined by Connecticut General Statutes 14-1.
The amendment has been read and seconded.
And, Mr. Chairman, if I may add a comment to clarify. First of all, this codifies what the chief is standing here telling us, right? So everyone involved in this has gone on record saying this does not include e-bikes, this does not include e-bikes. And yet we have some law-abiding, nervous residents who are reaching out and saying, I want to make sure that I can ride my e-bike to work, because for some people that's how they get around. And they're looking at this statute and they're getting nervous and they're saying, I don't know if I can. So if the intention is to not include e-bikes in this ordinance, then I don't see any reason not to call it out. The chief has already told us this is not about e-bikes, so this is just putting in the language that matches what the chief and the city attorney has said. And I believe, Attorney Bertram, if you can comment on this, we spoke about this earlier, and I believe some of this language came from the state statute, right? Bicycle with an attached motor. And there was an additional phrase you said that was added to the state statute, which is the phrase that I've used. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. So we're just lining up the language with the state statute. And to your point, you know, a lot of folks looked at this, because I've had a conversation with quite a few people. A lot of folks looked at this and said, oh, well, it's piston displacement, so that's not an electric motor. Well, not everyone knows that, to Attorney Bertram's point earlier. Not everyone sees that and automatically knows that my e-bike is okay. So this is just to let residents know what's been said here verbally at this meeting is just to put it in writing.
Mr. Chairman, can I help maybe with a point of clarification, if it's appropriate for a point of clarification? So when you look
Go ahead, Chief.
Thank you. When you look at the exemptions, all of these vehicles in the exemptions, and golf cart was included because if the local traffic authority allowed them, then they would be legal in certain municipalities. But all of these are legal, street legal vehicles. And so all of these may, a registered motorcycle, a registered motor vehicle, all of these vehicles may still be used in street takeovers, but this doesn't apply to them. So that's the reason why e-bikes and mopeds and wheelchairs and snowplows were included, just to exempt any registered street legal bicycles, you know, e-bikes, those things. That's my understanding of the intent of the ordinance, the way it was crafted. Again, my understanding, and I don't know if that helps at all.
Thank you for clarifying that, Chief. So what do you want to do with that? He made it very clear, if the vehicle is not involved in a street takeover, it doesn't apply. Alderman Pacelli.
The preamble does not go in the ordinance, right? In the ordinance itself. So folks are going to read the ordinance, and they're not going to have the context of only if you're involved in a street takeover. So, sorry, go ahead.
Thank you, Chairman Vitro, through you to Attorney Bertram. Again, I don't think this is about trying to be right or wrong, who's right, who's wrong. This is more just, I think, trying to match what we have here with the language in the statute, and for whatever reason, it's not here. And if this makes it consistent and matches up with state statute and potentially the other municipalities that have similar language, I think that's probably a wise decision, especially in light of the fact that we had numerous people that have expressed both at this meeting today, and I know many of you heard individually from constituents about the e-bikes. So I don't think we're trying to add something that was unintended. I think we're trying to make the intended obvious and match statute. Is that accurate, Attorney Bertram?
Mr. Chair, through you, Alderman Pacelli. So Connecticut General Statute 14-1, parens 58, defines motor-driven cycle to mean any of the following vehicles that have a seat height of not less than 26 inches and a motor having a capacity of less than 50 cubic centimeters, piston displacement, A, a motorcycle other than an autocycle, B, a motor scooter, or C, a bicycle with attached motor, except an electric bicycle. It's not word for word, but the one thing that's missing, what Alderman Federico, I believe, is referring to, is the definition in the ordinance doesn't have that comma, except an electric bicycle. I don't think it changes it. Really, I know we've all done a great job. What we're talking about is behavior, and every time we get specific to the apparatus that's being used, it gets a little confusing, but for consistency purposes, I don't see any downside to adding, to match 14-158 by adding except an electric bicycle.
Can we call the question then related to that amendment at this point?
Is there any more discussion on that amendment? We're going to vote on the amendment. All in favor of the amendment? All opposed? Roll call vote. Madam Secretary, please.
Alderman Archiolo. Alderman Bevan. Alderman Casey.
Yes.
Alderman Federico.
Yes.
Alderman Fowler.
No.
Alderman Healy. Alderman Jenkins. Alderman Marlowe.
Yes.
Alderman Morenin. Alderman Pacelli. Alderman Smith.
No.
Alderman Vitro.
Yes.
Alderman Vitale. Alderman Willis. 10 yes, 4 no.
10 yes, 4 noes. The amendment passes. On the original motion, any more discussion on the original motion? Alderman Archiolo.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, through you. I just had a quick question to the chief. It sounds like the vast majority of this ordinance is echoing state statute, and that, to your words, this is merely another tool to help enforce that. I wanted to get your opinion, though, on section 14-60, the sale of gasoline for illegal purposes. That seemed a little spotty to some of us, and I wanted to get your opinion on it.
Sure. So when I had made the statement that most of it echoes, I'm not familiar with any state statute that requires this, that has this language. I'm just not familiar with it. regarding this, and I've been asked about this before, I think there's a deterrent value there to post the sign because you shouldn't be driving an unregistered vehicle up to gas. You should be trailering it or using some other way to convey it. But I don't think that we want to, we should expect that a gas station employee is going to confront somebody who's self-serving gasoline. We know that the behaviors associated with these street takeovers can be violent. And so, while I understand that it's there, I would hope that the deterrent value is we can't gas in Milford because they're gassing someplace, right? 100 vehicles are pulling and gassing someplace. I do think that there may be a possibility, or there certainly, I shouldn't say may, there's a possibility that if there's a particular gas station in a particular location that is in collusion with these folks, and we can prove that come here, you can come through Milford, I'll gas you up. Well, then I think that's a different story. So I think the enforcement of that by the police department would be unlikely, except in those circumstances.
Would you see it as much of a detriment if we removed that section from this ordinance?
No, I wouldn't. We're focused more on the behaviors, the driving and whatnot, so.
Thank you. And to your point, I think it might be a little dangerous to put the onus on a gas station attendant to confront somebody who shouldn't be gassing something. And most gas stations in Milford are self-serve, so they'll have to patrol that, and you know, an attendant will see that sign and think to take it upon themselves to maybe confront that person.
Yeah, it's not something we should encourage or expect, but again, I do think there is some deterrent value to the signage, and it does leave open the possibility that someone is in collusion with them. I haven't seen that. I'm not aware of anyone being in collusion. I only draw that as a remote possibility.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Any more discussion on the original motion? Alderman Fowler.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you, Alderman Archiolo's point, I totally agree that this would be a burden on gas stations. But I also want to ask you a question kind of similar for Section 14-59. Would you foresee us running into a similar issue of, like, say if, a vehicle dealer, sells something unbeknownst to them and it's used in a street takeover, how would that impact them? Thank you.
I'm sorry, I'm not sure if I understood the question.
Sorry,
I apologize.
so if, basically if a vehicle dealer sells a bike that's eventually used in a street takeover, would they be punished per this ordinance? Or am I misreading that? I might be.
Mr. Chair, through you to Alderman Fowler, maybe I can help out. Section 1459 simply requires the posting of the ordinance. So prospective customers know you can't drive these vehicles on public streets.
Oh, okay. Gotcha.
It's just a notice requirement. It's like saying you can't buy alcohol unless you're 21 in bars and restaurants.
Any more discussion on the original motion? Alderman Willis.
Mr. Chairman, thank you, through you, to either Mayor Giannatasio or the city attorney. In section 14 section 14-58, it talks about a hearing officer. Who will that hearing officer be, or will they be compensated, or can have more detail on that, or maybe Chief Mello?
That's administrative hearing. I'll take care of the enforcement piece.
Mr. Chair, through you to Alderman Willis, it's a mayoral appointment subject to the board's approval.
Thank you.
Alderman Moran.
Thank you, Chair. Through you to City Attorney.
I had that question as well because it stumped me as to what the value of the mayor appointing a hearing officer would have to the conducting of the hearing of the police department and then approval of the Board of Aldermen.
Mr. Chair, through you to Alderman Mulray. I'm sorry, I don't understand your question.
So my question follows in
understand where you
regards
are.
to
I
the
don't understand
hearing
the
officer.
question.
So why is that language in here? What's the value of the mayor appointing a hearing officer and then the Board of Aldermen approving that to allow the police department to do their hearing?
The police department are the prosecutors. The hearing officer is the judge. I don't understand that. I guess I'm stuck on the word value.
So why is the mayor appointing that person though?
Who would you suggest?
I don't know, that's what I'm asking
Because,
you.
I will say I've read a lot of these ordinances since this was initiated and proposed. It's virtually identical to the other 10 towns and the 30 or so towns across the tri-state area. When you say value, why is it? Well, it's a mayoral appointment subject to your aldermanic approval. There will be a hearing officer. There's due process required. There's a hearing. I'm just trying to answer your question. There's a hearing. The police officers will present their case as to where there's the violation. The owner of the vehicle can make a defense. It wasn't me. I wasn't driving. Those are all defenses within the ordinance, and the hearing officer will make a decision. There has to be due process if you're going to take somebody's property.
Right. But I guess my concern is the delay, the timeline by the time you have an appointment that comes then before this to hold the process up for the hearing. I mean, if you're not going to have just a traditional person appointed, you're going to appoint someone different as the hearing officer each time you have a potential hearing?
Oh, no, that's not how I read it at all.
Okay.
I read it as a hearing officer.
At some point will be appointed and they'll be that officer throughout.
Yeah, in the same manner that a commission member would be appointed by the mayor subject to aldermanic approval. I'm sorry, I didn't understand.
Okay.
I don't
Not
see it as
each case.
a la carte.
Okay.
No.
Okay.
Alderman Healy.
Yes, same question relative to the hearing officer. I would, assume the mayor would look for a qualified individual with some legal expertise, someone that would be able to conduct a hearing, review the information that's presented by the police department relative to evidentiary value, present that, make an analysis, and then there'd be an adjudication by the hearing officer. And this board would completely have the opportunity to be able to look at the qualifications of the person that the mayor, brings forward, and that person would be appointed as you said, as similar to a fire commission or a police commissioner, and that's what we'd be looking for. On a follow-up just on that, and thank you for acknowledging that, the city attorney. On the section that Alderman Archiola mentioned, which is the sale of gasoline and for illegal purposes, on subsection A of that, it says no owner or employee of any retail dealer of gasoline shall, and if this was going to remain, I would put the word knowingly in there, sell, offer, or sale. And I would also, under subsection C, any owner or employee of any retail dealer of gasoline who knowingly violates any provision of this, because that's going to be part of the investigative process that the police department would do in questioning people who violate this particular ordinance, and then they would be looking possibly as a follow-up. I think, as Alderman Archiola indicated and the chief, that the ordinance might be overbearing relative to the responsibility to a retail owner looking at this, and it may well be just another investigative avenue, but I find that it's going to be difficult and concerning relative to the value of it overall. So, will there be a motion on the floor?
Yes, actually, I would like to make an amendment to actually remove 14-60 from this ordinance.
Second.
Motion has been made and seconded. Is there any discussion? Alderman
Mr. Chair,
Vitale.
can you repeat that amendment?
Sure, I'd actually like to make an amendment to remove section 14-60 from this ordinance.
Thank you.
Any more discussion on the motion? Alderman Moran.
I just wanted to ask for clarification, Chief Mello. You said you would prefer to have signage, though, a posting, because that's also under this section,
Well,
or no?
I think it has value. This is your ordinance, and I just want to give you the best information that I can. And so I think signage could have a deterrent value. And I also think that, again, I'll restate that I don't think we should be encouraging people to confront somebody buying gas. And so I think it does have value.
Okay. So can we make an amendment to then perhaps delete A and C and keep B?
If I can comment on that. I would defer to the chief on this, but a concern I would have is that the sign and an employee trying to enforce what that sign says are linked. If the sign doesn't exist, there's no opportunity for them to approach someone who's potentially dangerous. So I would want to keep my amendment as it is. Thank you.
Alderman Casey.
Yeah, I agree with Alderman Accarelli. I think it's too onerous to mandate all gas stations to post the signs. So I agree with the intent of the police chief, but I think that I'd rather see section 14-60 stricken entirely. I think that it's not we have a good ordinance. We don't need to complicate it more. If we see the chief of police says and we need something more, we can always take it up later. But I think that I agree with Alderman Hucker, so I am supporting the stricken entirely.
Alderman Healy, you got your hand up? Alderman Federico.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I agree with Alderman Casey and Alderman Archiolo to strike this section. Because time is of the essence here, I think we should deal with the rest of the ordinance tonight. I wouldn't be opposed to that being reworked and coming back before us, focusing just on the signage and perhaps with a fine tied to lack of signage as opposed to a gas station attendant trying to enforce this. But I would be open to something else if you want to come back with it as a separate ordinance. But I will support the motion to strike the section for tonight.
Any more discussion on the amendment? Seeing none, Alderman Healy.
Just one more comment. The chief stands before us, and I know on this particular matter, it's an important public safety, issue. I questioned the chief. I sent communications to him. He responded to me, and I know he did to a number of other people that are on the board also who had concerns and questions, and I thank you so much for all the information you provided. It's been very helpful.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Any more discussion on the amendment?
I'd like to call for a brief recess. Sorry.
Recess, 5 minutes only.
Are you talking about cell phones?
No, I'm talking about this, what's prohibited here. So,
I think it would be a very big sign.
okay,
Because I understand exactly what you're saying, but I think to your point, I think an educational campaign needs to follow this. People need to see it. It needs to be on social media. It needs to be out through the press release. We need to be talking about it. The news will probably pick up, especially when I mentioned the drones. They're going to be all over that. So I think we have to seize the opportunity to let the public know what this is, what it means, and we want offenders to know. So the information campaign is going to be important.
right, yeah, I'm just thinking of, if there is an event going on and they're driving, right over the border into the city, if there was some way to, say, hey, don't come here, but.
Yeah, no, I think it would be a big sign. That's the only problem. It's
Okay,
kind of a lot
fair
of
enough,
information.
fair enough, but the education is what I was getting at.
I think, I agree.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you.
All right, we're going to vote on the original motion. All in favor? Wait a minute. Alderman Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chief and the City Attorney, I just have a couple questions on the language here, in particular in 1456, the penalty portion, and in particular in Section C, where the language says that in the second sentence, any motorized recreational vehicle used in violation of Article 5 shall be seized by any police officer and shall be forfeited to the city. In Section 1458, we have a hearing process that I think can end up with the owner of the vehicle actually getting the vehicle back. And so it just looks to me that that language which says it shall be forfeited isn't quite right. I think it may be forfeited if the due process provisions of 1458 come to their conclusion and they lose their vehicle. Am I reading that correct?
Mr. Chair, through you to Alderman Smith, I don't know if I'm stepping on the chief's toes, but it's a good pickup, I agree. Changing the obligatory shall to may, because that 1456 as drafted seemingly anticipates the outcome for which we don't know of 1458.
So with that, I would like to propose an amendment there in 1456C in the second sentence so that it would read that any motorized recreational vehicle used in violation of this Article 5 may, not shall, be seized by any police officer and may, not shall, be forfeited to the city in accordance with sections 1457 and 1458 of this Article 5. And I think I think we need a second, actually. Second. And then I think what that does is it ties that section in with the discretion of the officers and then the due process safeguards in the following sections.
Good pickup. Thank you.
Motion has been made and seconded. Is there any discussion on the amendment? Hearing none. All in favor? Opposed? Amendment passes unanimously. Thank you. Around the original motion. Any more discussion on the original motion? Hearing none. All in favor? Opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Thank you very much, Chief. Assistant Chief.
That's going to be a doozy tomorrow.
Alderman Pacelli, ordinance B or 2.
Yes, thank you, Chairman Vitro. Agenda item 12A2, the ordinance committee did vote in favor of bringing the ordinance before the full board for consideration, and that is an ordinance adopting Chapter 17.1, Pension Plan for City Employees, Article 5, adjustments for existing retirees currently receiving benefits under Article 2 and Article 3 of Chapter 17.1, Section 17.1-66, implementation of adjustment for general government employees of the Code of Ordinances of the City of Milford.
Motion has been made and seconded. Is there any discussion? Alderman Jenkins.
I just want to make sure that I am understanding of this, that this increase in pensions is already accounted for in our pension fund and would continue to be self-sustaining barring a market crash investments, but this is planned for and sustaining itself.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, if I may, to Alderman Jenkins, the answer is that the alternative suggestion by the actuary to increase the annual actuarial determined employer contribution for $323,000, that was included in the budget for 24-25 that this board adopted, and that the Board of Finance also adopted that amount as well. Thank you.
Thank you, and I apologize, Chairman, for not going through you.
Any more discussion on the motion? Alderman Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and through you to the Finance Director. Is our pension fund presently underfunded, actuarially underfunded? And if so, by how much?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, to Alderman Smith. My recollection from the past pension valuation reports is that the plan is approximately 80% funded. So they're approximately a 20% underfunded, if you will. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, a couple of more questions to the Finance Director. And how much, it's my understanding that roughly $400 million is under pension, is the total pension portfolio right now? Is that about right? 400 million?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, Alderman Smith, that is approximately correct. It's been over the past several years somewhere between 380 million to a little over 400 million.
All right, and am I reading this memorandum that's attached to the ordinance here correctly, that in order to make up the cost of this, there would need to be a one-time, if we were to do it by a one-time contribution of roughly $4.1 million?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, Alderman Smith, that would, to clarify, that would be if we did not want the actuarial accrued liability to change. Then we would have to make a one-time lump sum contribution of about $4.1 million. And then as you see in the next paragraph, the alternative would be to fund it annually, and that would be about a $323,000 increase to the annual required contribution determined by the actuary each year.
So then is it fair to say that the 4.1 million we're about to vote on now will increase the actuarial underfundedness of this plan by about 1%, 4 million on 400 million?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, Alderman Smith, I would say, as it says there, yes, it does increase the actuarial accrued liability by the 4.1 million, and we will fund that liability annually under the alternative method of adding about $323,000 to the annual contribution that is included in our annual budget.
And I think my last question here for you, I know we just went through the whole budget, but if a 1 mil increase yields how much revenue to the city? In this last cycle, we had that number, we were using it a lot. What was that number again?
You said 1 mil?
1 mil.
1 mil. Well, if I'm not mistaken, it's been a couple of months, but I believe it's close to 8 million, or yeah, a little over 7, close to $8 million for 1 mil.
Thank you. That's roughly how I remember it. So then the way I read this is that we are, if we're going to vote in favor of this, we're going to be increasing the unfunded liability in our pension plan, making it even worse off than it is. And I know that 2 mayors ago, we had a pension plan that was 120% funded, overfunded. And now it's underfunded. It's underfunded by 20%. And this action would cause us to increase that underfundedness by a full 1%. And whether it's through the $323,000 per year increase in the budget, or a one-time $4.1 million contribution, which is roughly $500,000, one way or another, the taxpayers of the city of Milford pay for this. And while I'm receptive to the idea that these retirees haven't had a cost of living increase in quite some time, and that it would be fair to give them a cost of living increase, not now. We just raised taxes on all the citizens of Milford, and this is going to lock in and bind this board and future boards. It's going to limit their ability to give either tax relief or decreased increases in taxes to the citizens of Milford. Or if we do it all at once, it's going to force us to raise taxes by a full $500,000. So I think now is not the right time to be doing this. If we had a pension plan that was 120% overfunded, or even 100% overfunded, if we were in a situation where we were running surpluses and we weren't having to raise taxes on people, then that would be fair. But we're not in either of those situations. We have a pension plan which, in my mind, 20% is a seriously underfunded pension plan. We have a seriously underfunded pension plan. We are raising taxes on the people of Milford. Now is not the time to be doing what is admittedly a nice and appropriate thing. Now is not the time. So I would urge folks to take a look at this in that light, and for prudence sake, to vote no on this. And Mr. Chairman, I would ask for the vote to be by roll call.
Alderman Pacelli.
Thank you, Chairman Vitro. Through you to Mr. Rodici. Can you just repeat what I think I heard you say, which was that the most recent budget that this board has passed has already taken into account for and accounted for a 4% increase within that budget? And if that's true, then that would indicate that us moving forward today with an approval of the recommended 4% for those who haven't had an increase in the last 6 years would not cost the taxpayers of Milford any additional funds this year. Is that accurate?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, to Alderman Pacelli, yes, that is accurate for the 24-25 budget that was recently adopted.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Alderman Pacelli. Any more discussion on the motion? Alderman Healy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Through you to the Finance Director. We're wrapping up, obviously, last year's budget, and the projections seem to have been, when we completed our last budget cycle, to be positive in terms of revenues, coming in. Because this is already accounted for, I believe that it's well-deserved for our city employee retirees to receive this cost of living increase. And I believe that you and the Chief Executive, the Mayor, will be, looking at the finances that as we wind up and you write your next fiscal report, that anticipating some positive news relative to revenue. Is that correct? That you'll have the ability to be able to utilize in this regard?
Through you, through you, Chairman Alderman Healy, I just want to clarify, what do you mean to use in what regard? I'm not quite clear.
So this is already accounted for, and we're talking about within the budget process, and I believe it is well reserved. Now we're talking about, it'll be another budget cycle, you know, in the future. We are increasing by 4% for these retirees. It's in perpetuity for as long as they live, that they will be receiving it. And there is an end result for all of us at some point. So that group of people, 2021 retirees that we're granting this to, I think it is well reserved. I think our revenues are positive. If there was an aberration relative to where the financial status of the city is, we still have the unaccounted balance fund to be able to go into to offset, you know, something that's there. And the bond rating company also, because we had made the pension payments previously, was positive, which is why our bond rating is AA+. And so I'm not seeing an issue with giving just rewards to the retirees. I think we're in good fiscal condition. Could you say that we are in good fiscal condition in our ability to reward our retirees with this is doable?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, Alderman Healy, yes, in short answer, yes, we are in a good financial condition to be able to afford this proposal. Obviously, if COLAs were adopted year after year, that's a totally different story, and the actuaries have raised the concerns with that approach. So just focusing on this proposal, yes, it is budgeted for, and we are in the financial condition to be able to fund it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any more discussion on the motion? Alderman Federico.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Through you to Mr. Aradisi, if I could just ask for clarification. When you were talking with Alderman Smith earlier, it's that $4 million is approximately a 1% that's going to be an unfunded liability. So is it safe to say that if our, I know you said we're approximately 80% funded, and that, so if we were 80% funded exactly, we'd now be roughly 79% funded? Am I looking at that the right way?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, Alderman Federico, I don't think it's that quite simple. There are different factors and calculations that the actuary uses to come up with that funded figure. It also depends on the value of the pension funds, how the investments do, and the actuarial's computation of the value of the fund, among other factors. So I don't think it's like a direct going from 80 to 79 per se. I think what's important to focus on is, are we going to fund the impact of this 4% increase? And in order to do that, we would have to fund it through that ADEC each year.
Okay.
Or else have to put in this large lump sum all at once, which I don't think we can really afford in one lump sum. I would not recommend that. So right. I hope that clarifies your
Do you think it would
concerns.
Do you think it would significantly move us away from the 80%? I mean, 80 to 75, or it can't be much more than that, right?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, Alderman Federico, I know that the chairman of the pension board is here, so I welcome his thoughts as well on this matter. Thank you.
Just for some clarification, we're probably about 83% funded right now per the last report. I would expect that number to go up on our next analysis. The pension fund value is currently somewhere between 430 and 450 million at about our all-time high right now, and that was based on the the end of May and that did not include pricing for a lot of our investments. So I would expect those numbers to actually go up. And I know we've talked about the ADEC some. I would expect that number to come down in the future because our investments have gone up and we have reached our fully funded. The city at one point was behind in its funding, and it has reached its full funding over the last few years. So I would expect that number to come down a little bit. So the increase of 323,000 per year may be absorbed in the ADEC without an increase. But this year it was not, because we are just now adding the COLA, or the recommendation of the 4% COLA. As for the effect on the funding number, the percentage, there's a whole computation that is done. The actuaries smooth out the investments, and having been on the board for 13 years, I couldn't tell you how that is done.
I got it. You can't look at one piece in isolation.
Correct.
But it's not moving us away. This change does not move us away from the roughly 80% target that we want to be at.
No.
And are the actuaries, do they raise any concerns about us being at around 80% funding?
No.
Okay.
None at all. We're probably in the upper percentages of municipal pensions, funding percentages in the state of Connecticut. So there's no concerns as to where we are funded.
Great. Thank you.
If there was, we would come back to the board and say, we need more funding to get us up to higher percentages, but right now there is no concerns.
Okay, great. Thank you so much.
With no more discussion, we'll put it to a vote. All in favor? Opposed? Roll call vote. Madam Secretary, please.
Alderman Archiola? Alderman Bevan? Alderman Casey?
Yes.
Alderman Federico?
Yes.
Alderman Fowler?
No.
Alderman Healy?
Yes.
Alderman Jenkins? Alderman Marlowe?
Yes.
Alderman Morenin? Alderman Pacelli? Alderman Smith?
No.
Alderman Vitro?
Yes.
Alderman Vitale? Alderman Willis?
Yes.
12 yes, 2 no.
I'm sorry,
12 yes, 2 no.
12 yes, 2 no. Motion passes. Thank you, Madam Secretary. Next item on the agenda is report of standing committees. Any reports from standing committees? Alderman Bevan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Report on the Public Works Committee. I would just like everyone to know on not new, but old recycling rules, that there's no plastic bags in your recycling bin, no styrofoam, and you need to break down your boxes and put them in the recycling bin. Recycling will not pick up your cardboard leaned against your bin. I'm just bringing that out because they've started to not pick up recycling as of last week. Thank you.
Any reports of any more standing committees? Seeing none, move on to reports of special committees. Any reports on any special committees? Alderman Federico.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Sewer Commission met on June 26th, and they approved a multi-family 9-unit housing at 60 West Town Street. That's it.
Any more reports of any special committees? Hearing none, we'll move on to agenda item number 14, executive session. We do not have any executive session. And let me have a motion to adjourn. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Meeting adjourned. Thank you very much, everybody.